Welcome back, Michael Coren's show, and a special edition, a full hour with Mark Steyn, who is one of the, I think, most important voices in media at this time. And there are many questions to be asked. They can be asked in some countries, but this is a fundamental issue. In some parts of the world, we cannot ask questions about freedom, about Islam, about the future, how we will relate to one another. It's not about panic, it's about reality and really grasping what can be quite challenging. Mark, we ended the last part of the interview about competing victim groups, if you like. Right. When gay and Muslim, for example, seem to clash, when they collide, when ideas collide. Yeah, I always believed that feminism, the gay community, other groups would say, well, Islam, we respect each other, but there is an issue here because in terms of the way Islam often treats homosexuals, hanging them in public and that sort of thing, and the way it treats women. But we haven't seen any alliance against radical Islam. There was the Gay Pride Parade, where 150 million people march, of course. But the Gay Pride Parade in Toronto,
that's right.
The numbers do go up every year.
And there's 7 people left to watch it.
Well, there's a digression, but there was they actually analysed the numbers. It would have to stretch from downtown Toronto to Barrie for there to be 1 million people, but that's another issue. But there was a group of people who wanted to march queers against Israeli apartheid.
Right.
I wanted to join, but I didn't bother. And the argument was made, well, the only country in the entire Middle East where gay people are not only accepted, but often almost encouraged is Israel. Tel Aviv is becoming a gay tourist spot. And in other parts, just next door, you will be killed. I remember being in Israel once, and there was a boat with a rainbow flag, the gay flag, and it was in Israeli water down in Eilat. If it had gone over into Egyptian waters, they would have been arrested and probably killed. But still, people were marching in the gay parade. Only one country was mentioned in the entire parade against Israel. So I don't think that alliance is there.
No, I think, and even Cilio, I think, was the group that was marching in one of the big rallies just before the Iraq War, you know, these anti-war rallies, a group called Queers for Palestine. You know, good luck with that, Queers for Palestine. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But the lesson is that I think in the end, the government elites, the people who built the liberal, pluralist, multicultural state, will not defend its values. And I think you see this already. I think you will see it in homosexuality, for example, in Amsterdam, which is split now between a kind of hedonist, gay, long-haired, pothead, whatever's your bag is cool, what we think of as the most liberal city in Europe. And then this surging, ever more confident Muslim population. So they've got an epidemic of gay bashing going on in Amsterdam. Last year, the most popular homo hotel, as they call it in Dutch, the most popular gay hotel in Amsterdam, converted to become a Muslim hotel. This is, like, I would have thought, pretty crude symbolism, but it actually happened. Asked to explain this gay bashing, they got some geniuses at the University of Amsterdam to do a report for the city, who concluded that there was this epidemic of gay bashing by young Muslim men. It was because young Moroccan men were confused about their sexuality. Well, it doesn't seem likely to help intercommunal tension to suggest that these young Muslim men are just a bit light on their loafers. I don't think that's going to be a strategy that is going to bring peace to Amsterdam. But you see it again with the feminists, the American Academy of Pediatrics. I thought the feminists would at least hold the line at female genital mutilation. No, they've taken out the word mutilation now. The approved term is cutting. It's less judgmental. And the American Academy of Pediatrics was proposing that American pediatricians might agree to give these girls a ritual nick rather than sending them back for female genital mutilation.
They proposed that as a genuine compromise.
They proposed that, and I and a couple of other people drew attention to it, and they backed down. But what was interesting to me was the silence of the feminist groups. So we're seeing multiculturalism trumps, Islam trumps homosexuality. Islam trumps feminism. I think we saw with the firing of Juan Williams from National Public Radio south of the border that Islam trumps black. The liberal state, the liberal multiculturalists will not defend their own. This silly airhead lefty cartoonist at the Seattle Weekly, Molly Norris, who accidentally, entirely through her own ignorance, got briefly involved in Everybody Draw Muhammad Day and found herself threatened with death. The Seattle Weekly announced a couple of weeks ago that Molly Norris's cartoon would no longer be appearing because Molly Norris had to abandon her identity, and as the Seattle Weekly put it, quote, "There is no more Molly." And you read this thing and you think, why aren't these guys outraged? You know, 20 years ago, all those ghastly London novelists stood up to defend Salman Rushdie because he was one of them. He sat around the Hampstead dinner party tables with them, and they weren't going to let the Ayatollah take out a fatwa on him. And as unlovely as that ghastly London literary crowd are, almost as bad as the can-lit crowd, if you happen to find yourself in a room with them, they at least stood by their own. Nobody's standing by Molly Norris. Now we see time and time again that the supposed defenders of the liberal multicultural state will not defend its values.
Out of fear, we had Kurt Vestergaard on the Danish cartoonist, and Lars Vilks as well, and they were both, because they're actually both on the left to a certain extent. They were both almost in shock. I felt sorry for them because they assumed the liberal establishment, if you like, would say, this is wrong, we're going to stand by you. But they were virtually abandoned completely by people they assumed were friends.
No, it's a tragedy for Lars Vilks, who, as you say, is a man of the left. He's a Swedish lefty. And it doesn't get any more left than that. And yet the guy finds himself, you know, sharing panel discussions with a right-wing racist, homophobic bigot like me, because in the end it's only us crazy right-wing nuts who are going to defend the right of Lars Vilks to remain alive. The left does not defend its own on that. I think this is one of the greatest. I mean, we're talking here about, you know, in a sense, media figures, cartoonists, writers, filmmakers, and what have you. But I think it goes on at the lower level too. Barbara Kay reported to the House of Commons about a francophone school in Ontario, at which a Jewish teacher was being subjected to anti-Semitic taunts by Muslim pupils. If they had been, you know, white tattooed skinhead pupils, the school board and the principal and everyone would have cracked down. This time round, the principal and the school board and the local hate crimes unit all simply advised her to take early retirement and just go away quietly. And in the end, she went away quietly. The Jewish teachers went away quietly, the Catholic teachers went away quietly, the liberal, secular, atheist teachers all went away quietly. And that's the danger for the Western world, that in the end we will just go quietly into the long, dark Arabian night without even so much as mustering a defense of our supposed liberal values.
I want to talk about anti-Semitism in a few moments' time, because if we do think of this as the canary in the mine, if this does tell us about Western society, things are pretty bad in parts of Europe. But the Jewish community leadership, and we must differentiate between Jewish community, as with Islam, and community leadership, I don't want to paint a caricature, but there still seems to be an obsession with these neo-Nazi skinheads who I never actually see. I mean, the British National Party in the UK, groups in Scandinavia that were far right, are now supporting Israel and waving Israeli flags. But a lot of attention given to someone who somewhere denied the Holocaust. Right. But they almost seem nervous, reluctant to talk about radical Islam. We've spoken about Britain perhaps too much, but in the UK, anti-Semitism really had no significance. So there were a few people who had some odd ideas, but anti-Semitic physical attacks just didn't really even register. They're going up more and more and more, and virtually every person who commits the attack is a young South Asian Muslim. But still in Britain, in Canada, in the US, Jewish community often is very nervous of saying, it's about Islam, it's not about neo-Nazism.
No, and it's fascinating to me, I mean, not to be blunt about it, the stupidity of Jewish liberal groups, including Canadian Jewish groups with which I have a strong disagreement on, for example, human rights. I think Holocaust denial laws are ridiculous and a waste of time. And it's particularly stupid because the people who run liberal Jewish groups are too blinkered to have grasped a basic point, which is that the principal beneficiaries of the Holocaust have been Muslims. If you think back, all of us know from our parents' and grandparents' generation, continental Europeans of the 1930s, they would never have entertained for a moment, the erection of mosques in Brussels and Amsterdam and Frankfurt and Marseille and all over the map, if it hadn't been for official Holocaust guilt post-1945. So we have this absurd situation where the people who have most successfully leveraged Holocaust guilt turn out to be Muslims in the end. The Islamization of Europe is not unconnected to post-1945 Holocaust guilt, which discredited traditional continental nationalism. The one people who can't leverage Holocaust guilt now are European Muslims, who are having to hold social meetings and go to synagogues and go to schools and board buses under ever-increasing armed security. And yet, despite this, I mean, it is so frustrating to listen to the half-wits who run Canadian Jewish groups who obsess about some twerp of a so-called white supremacist living in his parents' basement out on the prairie somewhere in Saskatchewan, who's got a website that 3 other white supremacists go to once a month. Under the watch of the Bernie Faber at the Canadian Jewish Congress,
I'll be hearing from him now, won't I?
You'll be hearing from him, and good luck to you. Israeli Apartheid Week started in Toronto. It is Canada's gift to the world, and it is in part due because of the stupidity, short-sightedness and blinkered attitude of liberal Jewish groups in Canada and the United States and Europe in obsessing about the past, not confronting the challenges of the future, with the result that, as I say, Islam has in effect appropriated Holocaust guilt to advance its own ends in Europe.
You're not blaming Islam for that. You're blaming the white establishment for allowing Islam to.
Yes, yes, and in a sense, I find it. You know, you mentioned the Gay Pride Parade in Toronto, which you're so you're so Squaresville, Michael. You've neglected to notice that it's now actually the LGBTIQQ2S Pride Parade.
Twin-spirited being my favourite.
Yes, yes, that's right. Well, I'm so out of it. I thought Two-Spirited was like Anne of Green Gables. You were kind of capering with your little pigtails, frolicking Prince Edward Island. But you know,
it actually is a bit about that.
But it's just like everybody now could get a piece of the Gay Pride Parade. So in Europe, everybody gets a piece of the Holocaust Memorial Day Parade, and you can see this absurdity. But self-loathing French Jews, self-loathing British Jews, saying, "Oh, when I walk my mother in the Holocaust Memorial Day services, and I look at the tattooed number on her arm, I will think not just of Auschwitz, but I will think also of Rwanda." And I will think also of Jenin, and I will think also of Fallujah. And this list goes on. You think, well, Rwanda, okay, that was terrible. 1 million people died. But hang on a minute, Jenin, oh yes, that's the great Israeli massacre of all those Palestinians, where I think the final score was dead Palestinians 54, dead Israelis 28. But somehow now, in the scales of history, to self-loathing French Jews and self-loathing British Jews, the great Jenin massacre weighs as heavy as Auschwitz. And Fallujah, I don't even know what that is on about. What does that mean? The Americans retaking the town from the jihadists? That's an atrocity to compare. Everybody, just as everybody can now get into the Gay Pride Parade, all these intersexual questioning, two-spirited, all these proliferating groups, so anybody now can get a piece of the Holocaust Memorial Parade. It's ridiculous. We've lost all sense of proportion.
By the way, it's Pride Parade now. Pride, just Pride. We're all very proud. Back in a few moments. So proud of that on the Michael Coren Show. Don't you dare go away.